a first date, something usually filled with promise, energy, hope that maybe this is the first day of the rest of your life, spending it with someone special. But in today's story, a first date becomes the last day of someone's life. I'm John Lorden, and today on BrainScratch, we're looking into the case of Jesslyn Zuniga, a family who has been shattered by this tragedy, wondering if there's more to the story and who's accountable, who's the one that's going to accept responsibility for what happened to a vibrant young 18-year-old and taking that life away from this family. Let's go ahead and get started. This is Jesslyn Zuniga, and as you can see, these are recent photos. The photo on the right is her graduation. She's 18 years old. She just graduated from high school. This loss has affected all of her friends and family, and I'm seeing a big push online for hashtag justice for Jesslyn. So let's take a look into the story and see what we can learn about it, starting with kind of a big misunderstanding about what even happened around this event. As reported over at TMZ, what happened to Jesslyn Zuniga? How did she die? The family of young Jesslyn Zuniga of Houston, Texas is devastated after the young lady was found dead. Miss Zuniga died after leaving her home in Houston to meet a man on her first ever date. I'm seeing it written different ways on different articles. I believe it's her first date with him. I don't know if it's her first ever date. It's possible. But the more common phrasing I'm seeing is that it was the first time she was going on a date with this guy. She was found under the overpass of the East Freeway and Gregg Street around 3 a.m. Police believe the young lady may have died after intentionally jumping over the bridge overpass. It's kind of a bizarre scene. Like when you look at an actual photo of the location, it's a strange place to think, oh, someone would choose to stop on an overpass, pull over to the side of the road, jump out of a vehicle, which, by the way, is a vehicle that she's not reportedly driving. So she's asking someone else to pull over at the side of the road, and she gets out of the vehicle and then jumps over the overpass intentionally off of the bridge of the overpass. Her father said she was a young, beautiful girl full of life. She would never jump off a bridge. She just graduated last year, and it's not something that she would do. Let's see. Thankfully, this thought in terms of the investigation changes fairly quickly. This occurrence happened only a few months ago. I believe that she went out on Saturday night, and it was in the early morning hours of Sunday. That would be February 6th, 2022. That this occurred. Continuing at abc13.com, Houston Police Department initially believed that Jesslyn had intentionally jumped over and off the bridge, but details about a nearby crash sparked a change in the investigation. The family of an 18-year-old who fell to her death over the weekend is desperately searching for answers as to how their daughter left their home to go out on a first date and ended up dead. Jose Zuniga, her father, said his daughter was picked up at their home early Saturday night to go out with a guy she was meeting for the first time, after talking for about a month. And some of her friends were also joining. He knew something was wrong when his daughter never returned home, so he searched the area with his wife and family and started calling hospitals. Quote, "First time, and she didn't end up coming back home. She ended up dying," he said. Police said a gray Dodge Ram pickup truck hit a barrier a few times and stopped on the shoulder of the freeway. Witnesses told police a disturbance was heard. A man was shouting. The man then fled the scene on foot. It's not adding up for her father, who is pleading with witnesses to come forward. If you saw anything, if you saw the wreck or a struggle, please contact police, he said. As a matter of fact, I'd even roll that back and just say if you saw them interacting at all earlier. We don't know what's going on with this situation. We're talking about an 18-year-old. Is it possible that someone was buying her drinks at the club they were at? We're going to talk about that as we roll forward. But is it possible there's something else at play? We know that a toxicology was run. Those details are not publicly available. But in a situation like this, you have to wonder. I mean, what if someone slipped something to this young woman? And I'm kind of bothered by the details of the accident, just hearing that a truck hit a barrier a few times and then wound up stopping on the shoulder of the freeway. I'm just worried, like, was there something going on in the vehicle? Was there some type of struggle that was happening in the vehicle? We're going to get some more details about what was going on in the vehicle, but unfortunately not quite that level. But let's go ahead and continue. And this is the scene where Jesslyn would be found. Let me go ahead and zoom in on it a bit. And you can see, the police cars are kind of blocking off what's happening. I imagine that she is just on the other side of these vehicles. The truck is kind of farther up. And this is, I don't know if this is an on-ramp, but basically this bridge kind of has a downturn here. Let's go ahead and just take a look at it from a daytime view and see what you can see. I mean, this is a very tall bridge. This picture doesn't quite do it justice because we don't have a lot of objects to compare it to. But, if this stop sign is like 8 feet tall, this could be a 3-story fall from up here. But it does ramp down the further you go. So it kind of depends. But why is the vehicle up here and the police are back here? It's just kind of an interesting question. And is it that in one of those impacts, somehow she is thrown from the vehicle, but that is not the impact that actually stops the vehicle? It keeps going. I don't know. I'm just very curious about why the truck is this far up. And then, of course, even bigger question, why is the person that was driving the vehicle take off on foot? Huge question. And what happens after that? Let's get some more details. Over at thesun.co.uk, desperate for answers, and this is a photo of her father, Jose. Witnesses first told cops that they heard someone say, "Don't do it," before Zuniga's body was found under the overpass. It became a hit-and-run investigation, however, after further details emerged of a car crashing into the overpass, and a driver came forward to say he'd been involved in an accident with a young woman. So the guy that went running off on foot eventually does come to police and say he's the one that was driving, which I don't know. I would assume that the vehicle would be traced back to him in some way. But it seems like from what I'm seeing, he's the one that actually came forward. The driver of the Dodge Ram pickup truck has since gone to Houston police and said he was involved in a crash and that a woman was thrown from his vehicle. Another interesting detail is someone saying that they heard, quote, "Don't do it." It's an eyewitness account, and this is around 3:00 in the morning. Is someone seeing the situation and their brain is kind of plugging in details about what could have been heard in some type of argument or disturbance that was happening around where the truck stopped. I don't know. I don't know that quote is super accurate. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of details coming out from the police department to really support that or to refute it, to push it in either direction. Most of the articles I'm seeing on this case aren't even mentioning that specific quote, but they are saying that they could hear some type of, I don't know if it's even an argument, but they definitely heard a male's voice in particular yelling something. Continuing with another article at thesun.co.uk, who was Jesslyn Zuniga? She was an 18-year-old. She lived in Houston. She was a Texas native. She had reportedly graduated from Channelview High School per her Facebook page and has been described as a beautiful girl full of life. Little information is available on her personal life. At this time, her cause of death has not been revealed, and that's as of when this was posted, only a few days after the accident. I don't know. I think we're going to get a little bit of information on cause of death, but there are no formal records that I was able to find that have been released. On her Facebook page, we can see last post looks like it's from September 16th. And just to give you a little bit of insight into what type of person we're talking about here, I found this puppy on the road this morning. And if anyone wants her, let me know. She's super cute and small. Seems like someone that was trying to make the world a little bit of a better place for one particular puppy, and I'm sure for a bunch of other people in her circle of friends and family as well. Under the About tab, really, it's the same thing the article's citing. She went to Channelview High School, lives in Channelview, Texas. She's from Houston. Really nothing else in terms of work, education. Looks like she really didn't use social media a whole lot, at least in terms of Facebook, and I did find a Twitter account for her as well, where she's primarily just retweeting. Very few comments that she's making on her own here. Seems to be a fan of Nicki Minaj. I see a couple retweets about Kardashians and some things like that. typical stuff that you figure a 18-year-old would be into nowadays. I'm not seeing a whole lot in terms of what I would think would lead me to believe that we're talking about an 18-year-old that was like really into partying or anything like that. These honestly pretty straightforward kind of pop culture retweets here. Let's go ahead and continue, unfortunately, learning the most that we can about her, and that's by stopping at the obituary for Jesslyn. Jesslyn Amara Zuniga, 18, was born July 29th, 2003 in Houston, Texas, and entered eternal rest on February 6th, 2022 in Houston, Texas. She was a loving daughter, sister, granddaughter, and friend. She'll be missed dearly by all of those who shared wonderful memories with her. And unfortunately, we see the visitation for her is held actually on Valentine's Day, and then the funeral was held the next day on the 15th. Just really heartbreaking to think of all that. And once again, to just tap back into that, the hope of a first date, for it to end like this, it's really, really terrible. And then literally you have her visitation happening on Valentine's Day. It's just, over at click2houston.com, I don't know what happened, but I would like to know, said her father, Jose. I would like to find out what actually happened. Jose said that his daughter was found dead on the service road near an East Freeway overpass on Sunday morning. It was terrible, he said. We still don't believe it's true. Candles and flowers were left at a small memorial, and Jesslyn was picked up earlier by a guy she recently met. They went out to a club and were supposed to meet up somewhere else, and she never made it. And she never made it home, her father, Jose, said. We're just trying to find out basically what actually happened. That's what we're trying to find out too. And really, in a case like this, understanding that there's a very strong possibility this could be a tragedy that was an accident, that was purely an accident. What I'm seeing in the media around this is the family is still asking. As a matter of fact, one of the articles is a few months after the fact, and they're still asking for trying to find out what actually happened here. If it was purely an accident, I would hope that whatever Houston PD accident investigators are working on this, like, can't you share your findings with the family and like confirm, yes, we can see, the type of accident and what occurred here and how she could have been. I mean, if we're talking about her being ejected by the vehicle, isn't there something that HPD can do to help the family come to terms with that? It's kind of what I'm wondering. I don't know that that's happening based on what I'm seeing in the press. It might be. It might be that it's happening in the background and we're just not hearing about it publicly. But the family's still asking for answers as of extremely recently. One of the articles we're going to cover here is just from 2 days ago. Over at Mia.com, at this time, Jesslyn's cause of death has not been revealed. More information is expected at a later time as police continue to conduct an investigation. The identity of the guy she went out with has also not yet been revealed. Of course, that was in terms of major media, and that was back in that first week of what happened. However, on social media, friends and family were very quick to put out the word about Herminio Orozco. And these are several images of him. This is the guy that she had the date with and wound up going out. Now, very soon, his name would become public as well, including his image, because yes, he does come forward and tell them he was involved in an accident, but they also do file some charges. This is over at HoustonTX.gov for the Houston Police Department. Suspect arrested, charged in fatal crash. Herminio Orozco, 21, is charged with failure to stop and render aid. I mean, even if you don't understand what happened in the vehicle, certainly that makes a whole lot of sense. We know that this guy basically leaves the scene on foot. And who knows what difference that could have made, especially if he was the only one there. Who's the person that actually called 911? Who's the person that tried to get emergency services out there? Could something have happened in those first few critical minutes if he would have stayed by and actually rendered aid in this case? We're going to find out. He's probably not the only person that was actually on the scene. But continuing here, HPD Vehicular Crimes Division Sergeant D. Rose and Officer T. Phillips reported a gray Dodge Ram 2500 pickup truck struck a barrier multiple times and came to a stop on the shoulder of the freeway. According to witnesses on the service road, a disturbance was heard and a male voice shouting. A male and a deceased female, Miss Zuniga, were later observed on the service road. The male fled the scene on foot. So that's another interesting fact. Not only if we believe the story as it's being told, she gets ejected from the vehicle, he then runs down. So he goes down to check on her, sees what has happened, and then decides that he's going to flee on foot. I'm really confused by that decision to take off. I mean, the only thing I could think of is he under the influence? Is he worried about getting a DUI on top of all this? Would that really supersede the fact that this person that you took out on a date that night has been critically and mortally wounded? You're really going to go fleeing and take off? I'm really, really confused by that action. Further investigation identified Orozco as the driver in the case. He was charged and subsequently arrested on February 25th. So his name and image does become public, does start being reported in news sources as well. I found some commentary on this, and I wanted to include it at this point because it was written at about this time. There's a few more details that are going to come out after this, but just for what we know about this case up to this point, over at TexasWrongfulDeathLawyer.net, which obviously, yes, this is a lawyer that writes about these occurrences, tries to give some of his insight and input into cases like this. Commentary on Jesslyn Zuniga, possible hit-and-run accident in Houston. And I just want to call him out because it's his analysis. This is attorney Michael Grossman. The details surrounding this accident are very concerning, though they're far from concrete. The last thing I would encourage anyone to do is to jump to conclusions. If initial suspicions are correct, and this is a hit-and-run accident, then finding out why the crash occurred will be crucial. Absolutely. That's the thing I can't get out of my head. What was the conditions? I think most of you out there have been in an accident at some point in your life. How many times have you been in an accident where you've struck an object multiple times? I'm thinking about that. I mean, unless you're flying, you got to be just really jamming down the freeway. And the same barrier, you're hitting the same barrier several times. It sounds to me, it kind of feels to me like, is this a situation where someone reaches over, grabs on the steering wheel and pulls on it? Something else seems to be at play with this story. And I think he's making a really good point. We don't have all the details, and we're not in a spot where we can jump to conclusions, but we do have a lot of very, very big questions. Continuing with his analysis, this early in the morning, fatal accidents often involve drunk driving, and the fact reports claim that there are witnesses seeing those involved here at a club prior to the crash only raises these concerns further. I totally agree with him, but I have a question. Why are we not seeing a charge? And knowing that he goes into law enforcement 14 hours later, did they administer a test at that point? Would it be helpful even if they did? Is this a case of by the time he was in there, he would have been sobered up enough that he wouldn't register that he had that much alcohol in his system? I don't know, but we're not seeing any charges related to driving under the influence that are coming with this. I bring it up because if there was an alcohol provider involved in this tragic event, they too may be responsible. And this guy seems to know what he's talking about. Seems like he's foreshadowing for another article we're going to hit in a little bit. Dram Shop Law says that an establishment can be liable if they overserve someone whose intoxication leads to an accident. While someone can clearly face consequences for causing a crash or fleeing the scene, businesses can be held accountable when they ignore the rules and put lives at risk. Is it possible that happened here as well? Like I said, that's just one possibility, of course. The key right now is to rule nothing out unless the evidence says otherwise. Getting the victim's loved ones some answers needs to be the priority. I cannot agree with this guy more, and he's writing this February 8th. He's writing it that first week that it happens. And it's just heartbreaking to see that the family is asking for months after when this article comes out, hey, we're still looking for answers. We still want to understand what's happened. How can that not be a priority for Houston PD to make sure that this family knows everything they do and that they're comfortable with, yes, we really do believe that this is a case of a tragic accident where she was ejected from the vehicle, or at least to make them understand, hey, no, we think that there's more going on here, but we're still in the process of discovering it. I think if that message was given to the family, I don't think they'd be going to media saying, hey, we're out here 2 months later. We still don't know what's going on. So there just seems to be, unfortunately, a gap in communication between HPD and the family. It seems to be. Once again, that's a bit of an assumption, but it's coming from, you guys are going to see the articles for yourselves. The family's still asking. It would likely help if witnesses came forward to make sure the authorities have as much information to work with as possible. And that's why I said earlier I wanted to roll back based on what her father was saying, not just witnesses for the actual scene, but witnesses that might have seen them at the club. This is a club that allows 18-year-olds in, and I believe they also serve alcohol. So it's one of those situations where, yeah, maybe she couldn't go up to the counter and buy herself a drink. Maybe someone else could buy a drink and then give it to her. Does the club have some type of protection for making sure that isn't happening with their patrons that are under the age? Lot of questions around that. And honestly, this case has really made me think about that whole mechanism. Like, you know, I know kids want to go dancing. There should be clubs that they could get into. If I'm trying to recall, but I think in my teenage years, there was even places where like 16-year-olds can get in, but I don't think they served alcohol. I think that they were clubs made, or they would have hours made primarily for teens. And then I don't know if they would change over to like adult service later in the night, kind of empty the place out and then relaunch the club for late nights. It just seems like, how do you control that? How do you control, oh, I've got an 18-year-old, she's in there with a 21-year-old, he's going and buying alcohol, who knows where it's going? To the point of what the lawyer was saying, if he's going and he's buying so many drinks that he's actually feeding someone else drinks and he still gets intoxicated enough that it impairs his driving to the point of having an accident, shouldn't there have been some trigger on his tab? Like, hey, this guy has bought 7 drinks in the last hour and a half. Like, shouldn't there be some, almost like an automated mechanism that's part of the tab system that just kicks out and says, you know, this person's on warning for being overserved, something like that. I mean, obviously with today's technology, I don't think that's too steep of an ask. And especially if you're going to be an establishment taking on the responsibility of having 18-year-olds in your place while you have alcohol being served, I think it's kind of reasonable by today's standards. But tell me about it in the comments down below. Unfortunately, we do get to memorial events, and I got to tell you guys, just the footage that I'm seeing, the pictures that I'm seeing, the push on social media, there are a lot of people that love Jesslyn and are very, very hurt by this. And many of them get together here for a balloon release that was held for her. Dozens of people gathered with pink balloons near Eleanor Tinsley Park to remember 18-year-old Jesslyn Zuniga. We really do appreciate everybody coming out and giving the support they did, said her father. We know that everybody who met her loved her. Here he is again. We want answers. We want justice for her. The date on this one, February 11th. So once again, this article is still from within that first week. But let's go ahead and push in time over at click2houston.com. This article from April 7th, so much more recent, 2 months after the fact. And we're starting off with the sentence, 2 months later, the parents of Jesslyn Zuniga still want to know what happened. Quote, in our mind, it's not making sense. It's not adding up, says her father. Court documents confirm that police arrested Herminio Orozco, 21, regarding this case. Orozco has been charged with felony failure to stop and render aid. He told investigators that he, Zuniga, and others had left 1111 nightclub, located on the 2400 block of Austin Street, according to court documents. While driving eastbound on the highway, Orozco told investigators a white van struck his truck, ejecting Zuniga from the passenger seat. Now, that's really interesting because we're hearing about another vehicle being involved here. I don't know. I can't tell from footage or pictures that I've seen that another vehicle has stopped. So are we talking about a hit and run situation there as well before he decides he's going to run? Is it possible that this vehicle doesn't exist, that this is a story made up? I don't know. Everything is on the table at this point, guys. I'm just giving you the information that we're getting. But he's basically telling investigators a white van struck his truck and it's ejecting Zuniga from the passenger seat, which is just another thing. I'm having trouble with. Think of the direction that you're traveling. Think of where the impacts would be coming from. Like if you got hit from the rear, that's going to be kind of hard to eject her from the passenger seat. If you get hit from the rear and it knocks you into another object and that object stops you, yeah, we're going to see something like that. But based on the previous analysis we were hearing from Houston Police Department, the only thing they were noting was his vehicle struck the barrier multiple times. So I'm kind of confused, once again, at this new story of a white van being involved and wondering, okay, well, where's that witness? Is there someone else out there that has a piece of this puzzle? Zuniga's parents said a second man was in the truck with Orozco and their daughter. That man has not been identified nor charged in the case. So not just the two of them. We've got a third person in the vehicle with the two of them. Did he go running as well? I wouldn't think so, because we're not seeing any charges in the case. And I would think if he took off, they would have hit him with the same charge. Quote, the only people who knew what happened are the people in the vehicle. They're not talking. We don't know the final moments of our daughter's life, her father said. And once again, this is just leading me back to that concern that there could be some form of struggle that happens in the vehicle that causes not causes, but plays into this situation in some way. And if there is some type of struggle, you've got to roll it back from there and understand what's happening that leads to that. Where is the chain? I can see how frustrated her parents are. Where are you going to find the answer for this is the domino? This is the first domino to fall that caused all the rest of this to happen. And they're looking to do that. It's going to be pretty clear to you guys by the end of today's episode. But now, so we've got another person. Obviously, it seems like he's not communicating with the family as well. They wrecked 500 feet away, and she ends up 500 feet away, perfectly on the side of the road, her father questioned. So he's also having trouble with the kind of the same elements I am, just about where she is, where the vehicle is when it's found. Once again, back to kind of the physics of the accident. And I know I've seen accident investigators that are able to really make a lot of sense, like using computer models and things like that, be very detailed about, we can recognize something impacted the vehicle here. It hit this spot over here. This is where this likely happened. Physics models, like there's ways to understand that accident that it seems like, I don't know if they're not being communicated to the family, or if they are being communicated to the family, maybe the family's not understanding them. Maybe someone needs more patience with the family to kind of take them through it. Once again, just feels like there's a gap based on what the family's saying here. So 1111 nightclub, that is where they were. And this is just a quick map showing kind of the path of travel, just a few blocks from that to the highway that they get on. And then here is Gregg Street. And this is where, of course, the accident, I feel better calling it a tragedy, happens. 1111 nightclub, took a look at them. And like I said, yes, they are open to 18-year-olds. It seems like they do serve alcohol as well. The first thing that's noted on their website in terms of kind of their features, safe. Enhanced security measures have been implemented to ensure your safety. So I'm just kind of curious. Once again, I don't know how you can keep a location like this, how you can keep 18-year-olds protected. I've tried looking for some pictures to get a sense of like, how big is this place? How many people can be in there? And quite honestly, I don't know that all these photos are really from that location. I think some of them could kind of be stock photos. But I don't care if it's a location that holds 500 people or if it holds 75 people. I think it's still a pretty tricky proposition to say, hey, we've got the 18-year-olds protected and we can keep, the alcohol going to the people that are old enough to drink it and still keep an eye on everyone else and make sure that people are really safe in this type of environment. In this article, her father points out a very good point about this case. Quote, come on, leave somebody on the side of the road like that and run off? That's cold. That's a cold-blooded person. If it's an accident, you call for help. The parents also questioned that she was ejected from the car and that her injuries stemmed from a crash. Preliminary autopsy results only state that the cause of death was an accident. Mr. Orozco has left jail on a $75,000 bond. Court records show a bond violation for not reporting to pretrial services, as well as failing to get an ankle monitor. So he's on bond and apparently not following the conditions of that. I don't know if that means he's going to get rearrested at some point. There are no further updates on that aspect that I've been able to find as of yet. But this is that recent article, April 20th, 2022. And I told you, these parents are looking to understand this. Where does that first domino tip that starts this whole event? Houston club slapped with $20 million lawsuit. Jesslyn Zuniga's parents are suing in their own attempt to get answers and justice. They're coming after the 1111 nightclub. They're accusing the owners of overserving their customers, leading to dangerous and deadly consequences. Rick Ramos, a personal injury attorney representing the family, said the club overserved Orozco and allowed Jesslyn Zuniga to participate in underage drinking. The club has not yet commented on the lawsuit. Orozco is not currently facing charges related to drinking and driving. Brings up kind of an interesting thing in terms of this being a civil suit and trying to get that to go. Are you going to need Orozco to kind of admit to that in some way? We don't have, at least from what I'm understanding, I'm sure police would have filed a DUI charge if they had any proof that he was drinking that night. They haven't. So this lawyer is going to have to prove that he was basically under the influence when he was driving. Now, her toxicology, I know the family is going to have a report on, so they're going to know if she had alcohol or not. But really, I think the key piece is Orozco. Was he actually under the influence when he was driving? I think that's going to be kind of the linchpin to making this case. And outside of that, I literally had a phone call with the family of Thomas Jodry. It's a case that we covered previously that kind of leans into this aspect of overserving as well. They live in California. In California, trying to do a lawsuit like this, pretty much a non-starter. Like, their laws just don't really support the idea that an establishment could overserve in this way. Looks like in Texas, things might be a little bit different. So I'm very curious to see where this goes from here. The family and their attorney has held a press conference. I'm going to play some of those clips for you here in a moment, but if you have information that you think can help the lawsuit, I'll have contact information for their law offices, the attorney that they're working with, in the description box down below. If you have info that you think can help any type of criminal charges, please route those to the Houston PD. That information also in the description box down below, and includes a Crime Stoppers number if you need to remain anonymous for any reason. Now let's take a look at what their attorney and what the family had to say.
Jesslyn, as you can see, had 2 jobs. She went to St. Jack College, and she passed away in a very, very tragic sort of way. Essentially, Jesslyn was ejected from a vehicle at 3:10 in the morning that was driven by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Orozco, who's currently facing criminal charges. Mr. Orozco made a statement that he was in fact driving the vehicle when it crashed, and that crash essentially caused Jesslyn to be ejected from the automobile at 3:10. Mr. Orozco went on to crash the vehicle another time after Jesslyn was ejected from the car, which essentially left the car paralyzed and unable to move. She landed in a ditch on the underpass. She had no vital signs, according to Mr. Orozco, who fled the scene and failed to render aid. 1 hour before this accident, Mr. Orozco was at a place called the 1111 Club. The 1111 Club has become nothing more than a safe haven for criminal activity. It serves minors under the age of 18 on a repeatedly regular basis. It is one where the encouragement and the purchasing of bottled alcohol service to be drank directly, what we call self-pouring from the bottle, by the staff along with the patrons. So there's no glass. Essentially, you buy an entire bottle, they will put a clip on it, and you ingest the entire alcohol straight from the bottle, which means there's no supervision on how much alcohol is being consumed in the amount of time that it should be consumed, meaning there's no one to cut you off. In Jesslyn's case, Jesslyn arrived at the nightclub roughly at about 10, 11 o'clock at night. She was there with her friends. They went to a section. She was provided at that section 5 to 8 bottles of alcohol, Grey Goose, and we can establish that because we have 5 or 6 different witnesses' account that will be able to corroborate exactly the statement that I'm making. At some point in time, there's another section that's being purchased. 2 additional bottles of tequila are then provided to that section for consumption by Jesslyn and Mr. Orozco and 4 other individuals. As you can see, there's absolutely no supervision. We have now 2 straws with 2 different drinks. There's no one there to stop, no one there to supervise. This is the culture inside the 1111 nightclub. And then the patrons then just shuffle off and leave. Now, in our case, Jesslyn there's Mr. Orozco again, consuming more alcohol. This is a bottle of Don Julio now, I believe. Yes. So, as you can see, the alcohol consumption was so extreme to the point of intoxication that they kept continuing to serve him bottles of alcohol after he was clearly intoxicated. This is now by 5 different witnesses that were sitting near Mr. Orozco in the same section. We also have someone that was a cocktail waitress working there that night that has come forward and said that everyone in that section was intoxicated. We also have an eyewitness that when Mr. Orozco left, he was stumbling on the way out the door, became physical with Jesslyn on the way out the door to the point where security had to intervene and ended up, I believe, punching him in the face and throwing him down. But apparently at that time, he had become a danger to himself. He had become a danger to others around him by his behavior. The witnesses will tell you that he was angry, that he was irate, that he was loud, and that he was extremely aggressive, especially with Jesslyn. Also in the last year, approximately 3 months and 6 days ago, on October 31st of last year, we had 3 young ladies that also left the 1111 Club. And they were all under the age of 21. They all got in a car, and there were all 3 of them. All 3 of those babies were driving home, and they died. They crashed on Highway 59, and they were, ironically enough, ejected from their vehicles. It took approximately 14 hours to find them.
It has to be a stop. Somewhere in this line, we have to make this stop.
I've heard of bottle service, but I haven't heard of a place where that's all that you could have. I'm kind of surprised at the handling of alcohol that the attorney is telling us about here. Admittedly, he's talking about sections and bottles being bought for those sections. We don't know how many people are in that section, but even outside of that, it's got to be either a lot of people or the amount of alcohol is a really drastic amount for young people to be taking on. I mean, he's talking bottles and bottles, vodka and tequila. You know, we're talking hard spirits here. Really, really troubling. So I'm certainly going to keep an eye on this case and where it's going, and I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. Also, just a huge outpouring happened from friends, family, and the community. A GoFundMe was started to help cover the funeral costs, and they wound up raising over $17,000 to help them with that. So we're looking for people that have more information on this. Please share this video with any friends you have in the Houston area. I don't know about you guys, but there are so many big questions coming out of this case, and I just feel terrible that this family is saddled with them. And I really hope that there could be some better communication to help them understand what police do know about this case and what they don't know about this case. You know, it'd also be something to see the family coming out publicly and saying, hey, look, HPD is talking to us, but combined, we both have some very big questions about what happened that night. And I'm not quite seeing that unified front that I would hope for in a case of this nature. What do you guys think? Let's talk about that in the comments down below. And as always, I ask that we please remain respectful. A young life has been senselessly taken. I do think it's important to share this type of story to help foster conversations within our families with some of the younger members of our families to make sure that we don't have to face the same grief that Jesslyn's family is. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several people that are supporting the channel, helping to keep us here, trying to help these families in these really tough situations. Thank you to new patrons, Jacqueline Carter and Dr. Edward Moskowitz. If you want to support us here, please visit lordandarts.com, where you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee like Sharon Ayers recently did. We really appreciate your support. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Take care. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked right here on the Lord and Arts channel.